Champions Mojo is part of the CG Sports Network.
Welcome to the award-winning Champions Mojo, hosted by two world record-holding athletes and health, life, and leadership coaches. Be inspired as you listen to Conversations with Champions. And now, your hosts, Kelly Pallas and Maria Parker.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Champions Mojo podcast. And as usual, I am co-hosting with Maria Parker. Hey, Maria.
Hi, Kelly. It's so great to be here with you today.
Yes. Maria, we want to give our guest the proper introduction that he deserves in a moment. But first, before we do that, we got to say hello to Steve Mellor sitting there. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, ladies. How we doing?
Great.
Doing great. So what a pleasure it is today to have Steve Mellor, an outstanding leadership and development coach. Steve recently made this title official with his own new coaching business, though he has been coaching people to develop their full potential for over a decade. Formally, he is a Division I associate head swim coach at Louisiana State University. Steve is also the host of the Career Competitor podcast, which, like Champions Mojo, is part of the CG Sports Network. Maria, what else can you tell us about Steve?
Well, recently, Steve celebrated the very exciting accomplishment of coaching Brooks Curry to make the 2021 Olympic swim team and then to win gold. This is the first time a member of the LSU Swim Team has qualified for the U.S. Olympic team and earned a gold medal. We're excited to talk with Steve, who's a swimmer himself, about what he's learned through his rich experiences as a member of Great Britain's national team, a North Carolina state record holder and captain, the coach of an Olympian, a fellow podcaster, and now an entrepreneur starting his new business of career competitor coaching. Steve, welcome to Champions Mojo.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. It definitely fills me with a great deal of joy to hear all those accomplishments. Let me put it that way.
Hey, you did the work. Did the work. So really exciting stuff going on in your life. You have transitioned from a top Division I head coach and the coach of an Olympian to now an entrepreneur. You're starting your own business and you're offering some great services. So tell us what's up. What are you doing?
What's going on? It's been a bit of a roller coaster the last few months. Came to a massive decision in my life to step away from swim coaching full time, and I think the catalyst behind that decision more than anything was actually an 18-month process. If I'm being completely honest, I think I've always been, those that have known me within the swimming world have always known that I've had other things in the fire as I go through my life. I'm a huge believer in, not just weighing ourselves down with just one path, having a few paths going on. And, as things like the podcast started to take shape, as a few things started to transition on a personal level too, it just became clear that the time was now. The time was now for me to make a decision and go all in, very much betting on myself, I would say. And, I feel great about the decision. I'm a couple months now into building a company that I am the face, the voice, the person of, and at the same time, I look at the timing of my decision, with it being right at the end of 2021, heading into a new year. I couldn't be more excited for a new year and just everything that I feel I have to offer within the service.
That's great. And you went out of swim coaching at the top, the very tippy top, right?
Right. Climbed the mountain through the summer, and everything I did there with LSU and with my career as a whole, as such a fan of sport, you see it all the time, right? People get to the top and then they keep going, and who knows if they stay at the top, do they fall, do they go back up again, whatever it may be. And for me, I couldn't have felt more comfortable in the end with my decision, as hard as it was, to look back and say, hey, you took an individual to the top of the mountain in the sense of making a U.S. Olympic team, the first ever to do it with the university, and then for him to get that added bonus of the gold medal on the back end of that was just something that, it was a storybook ending in so many ways. And who am I to try and maybe disrupt that ending any further? Just sort of let it be, right? Let it be and walk away at that point. So
that's wonderful. Are you going to stay where you are? I mean, now you can go anywhere in the world you like.
Right. Yeah. So my wife has a wonderful job here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so, we're very happy here, 100%.
Okay. So Steve, if getting if to a swim coach, an Olympic gold medal and an Olympian is the the top of the mountain, as we just said.
Hmm.
What is the vision for this new company and you? What's the top of the mountain, which may take another 10 years to build, but what is that long range vision for what your company is going to offer and what you see?
Yeah, the real answer to that question is I don't know just yet.
Oh, I love it.
But
I love it.
The practical part of that answer, though, I would say is the source of what it is I'm trying to do, which is really just get the world into buying into the idea of, listen, we have optimal versions of ourselves, and we ourselves are in control of whether or not we realize that version of ourselves. And that has been at the core of how I've coached swimming my entire life. And it's funny because people would come to me in the case of someone like Brooks or some of my other successful athletes over the years. What was the secret? What did you do? And I would start to talk about the relationship. I'd start to talk about the people, the person, sorry, that he is, and the relationship that we held, and the amount that we invested into that. And a lot of coaches, they didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear what was the what was the set? What was the magic set? What was the things you were doing within training? I'm like, I was probably doing a lot of the same things that you were doing, quite honestly. There's enough information out there now for the world to know how to make someone fast at swimming. But the difference in terms of that 0.01%, that little factor that's going to get you to the top of the highest of mountains, for me, comes back to who I am at my core and what it is I've been preaching to athletes for years now, which is, listen, there is potential here that you don't even recognize. There is an optimal version of yourself that you don't even recognize. I'm going to recognize that. I'm going to recognize it. We're going to discuss it, and we're going to work on bringing it out of you. And it could happen in the next week or two. It could happen in the next 3 or 4 years. It's going to take time. But once we recognize it, then we immediately admit that, hey, we're starting the journey, and that's exciting. And so for me, I recognize that within the service. I think my service has the potential to impact so many. I'm one person, so I know that, hey, I'm probably limited to how many people I can impact. But at the same time, I'm excited to go on this journey, because it is a journey where I'm going to continually discover what my optimal self is as a service, as a company, while I'm trying to do the exact same for those clients that I get to work with.
That's so beautifully put. So, as you're using the shovel, I was thinking as you were talking, well, he's helping his clients, his coachees, discover the best in themselves. And there's a shovel there because you're uncovering things. What kind of, how do you do that? How do you, with anybody that you coach, how do you help them become their optimal self? How do you help them find what that is?
Yeah, there's a catalyst in everybody. There really is. And I love the question, because for me, that's one of my favorite things about any relationship that I have with anybody in my life. Like, when are they going to reveal that something about themselves that tells me, oh, that this is their potential. This is who they actually want to be. And so for me, that is one of the most exciting things about any relationship that you can encounter. And so much of what I'm doing right now, the phone calls, the Zoom calls that I'm having with so many people, I'm just trying to learn. Hey, who am I talking to? And what do you think of yourself? Or what do you think of your company? And is there a potential component within you that you're identifying without even necessarily realizing it? And so a huge amount of it, Maria, comes back to me just simply listening, seeing that human being, seeing them for who they are, and saying, right, what's got you to this point? What's brought you to this moment where you've decided that, hey, I want to be, let's say, a swimmer at LSU, or, hey, I want to be a client of yours as a life coach or a career coach, whatever it may be. What's brought you to this moment? Because there's going to be a reason, whether someone wants to admit it or acknowledge it or not. And sometimes it's a positive reason. Sometimes there's maybe a little bit of difficulty within that reason there that we need to discuss too. But I think a lot of it starts with simply listening and waiting for that moment, and understanding that there's going to be this catalyst. There's going to be this word, this sentence, this story that this person eventually reveals about themselves that's going to give me that green light of like, hey, so this is what we're doing here. This is who we want to be. And Brooks Curry is obviously a great example of that from a swimming standpoint too. This was a kid that didn't know how good he was until I picked up the phone and started telling him, quite frankly. So
that is so great. So have you found the catalyst in you?
Oh, great question.
Yeah, like just you are very in touch with with your feelings and knowing who you are. Obviously, you've jumped out of an incredibly successful career. There were many, after you left LSU, there were other head coaching jobs that came up that your name was mentioned in. You could have gone anywhere you wanted, basically, in the swimming world, and you chose to take another path, a very different path. So, Steve, one of the things we love to uncover, we've got our shovels out too, Maria and I, is what makes our guests the champions that they are. And you are such a champion. So what is Steve Mellor about personally, not about what you're going to do for your clients? Because I have no doubt that you are, incredible at coaching. But what makes you be able to take this different path with confidence and boldly go into this new territory?
Well, that's a good word, that boldly, that bravery, I think, bravery is something that I've acknowledged a lot of the time, because it kind of goes hand in hand with fear, right? How are we going to balance fear and bravery? Because it's hard to be brave when we're just filled with fear. And so little of my decision was filled with fear. My decision was one that I took confidently, because I spent 6-7 years now working on myself day to day. And I've been very public about it too. And I think that in itself gave me an ownership of who I was becoming. So here I am as a man that's been in therapy for 6 or 7 years. And I joke with people all the time. I don't go in with a box of tissues, crying my heart out every single time I go to therapy. Now, that's not in any way disrespecting people that need therapy for something that is truly a help to them in that relation. But for me, it was about being happy with the human being that I got to look in the mirror at every morning I woke up and every night I went to bed. I wasn't necessarily comfortable with the guy that was looking back at me. And so I just said, hey, like, to heck with it. Like, this is the time in your life. This was when I was just turning 30. And I said, you've got to start liking who it is that was waking up in the morning and going to bed at night. So I did a lot of work on that. And like I said, I was very open and honest. I would tell my athletes, I would say, hey, I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. So when I come to you and I say, listen, work on this, talk about this, fill me in on this, I say to someone who's an advocate and someone who's truly taking action in regards to that. So in terms of who I am now and why I can have this confidence in what I'm doing, it's because I get this return on my investment almost on a day-to-day basis now. I get to have conversations like this where I get to be a part of conversations with people that hear me, that listen to me, and that give back to me just as much as I feel I'm giving to them. And there's that reciprocation of energy, that reciprocation of knowledge, of experience, of journeys, of stories. That is what I think we as human beings is something that we should truly chase and embrace, is that opportunity to be so comfortable with who we are that we can go into conversations and just be so happy about the experience to just say, hey, I'm going to tell you about me. And I'm so excited to learn about you as well. And at the core of it, we're both going to benefit from this discussion. And that's how I identify with myself now. I identify myself as someone who's just passionate about being there for people, about sharing my story, being incredibly vulnerable and open whenever I feel it's necessary. And at the same time, just knowing when to just shut your mouth and listen to who it is you're talking to as well, because that's a huge part of this as well.
Oh, that was really beautifully put. And that's been my experience with coaching as well. But I think one of the issues I run into as a coach and also as a human, as my own issue, is like, how do I even know myself well enough to say, I some days I look in the mirror and I really like who I am. Other days I look in the mirror and I feel badly about myself. So how did you discover, who you were and what you didn't want? Is that just a personality thing? Anyway, I'll open.
Yeah, I've always been very self-aware, I suppose. I think it is something I was born with. My father was I always joke that he was a man that just read the book inside out on common sense. He just knows common sense. And I was raised with that. It was just, If I ever had an injury as a swimmer when I was 13 years old, hey, dad, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. That's not particularly helpful advice from a medical standpoint, but from a common sense standpoint, it's like, that's a good point. I shouldn't do that then. But it was something that really set me on my path in terms of, hey, know who you are in a room, know how you're coming off within this conversation, know truly the impact that you're having. Like, don't take yourself too seriously, because we can't all be, you can't be impacting everybody in a life-changing way on every given day at every given moment. There's got to be just some basic conversation in there. And there's also got to be some less than necessary conversations or not as important conversation, whatever it may be. There's a scale that we all exist within. And so for me, I look at myself and I just say, when I got to that point, Maria, and I said, hey, listen, this is time for me to acknowledge that I don't like who I am. One of the main reasons that was because I felt like I was disturbing the peace on a day-to-day level a little bit too much. I felt like I was getting in my own way. I could be having a peaceful day. I could be having a good day. And then it would no longer be a peaceful day. It would no longer be a good day. And I would just have to stop when this was happening repeatedly and say, well, you're the one who's living this day every single day. Is it something to do with you? And so I really started to ask that question a lot. Why am I leaving these social environments not really happy with the fact that I even went there in the first place? Why am I engaging with athletes and walking away and obsessing about those engagements over and over and over? Was there something within those engagements that I didn't like? Was it some way I came off maybe? And for me, that amount of obsession and that willingness to obsess and overanalyze told me, like, there's something going on here. There's something that you're not acknowledging about yourself, and you need to do something about it. And so along with that common sense is that ownership, right? It's like saying, well, you're the common factor here, so see it as it is and do something about it.
What was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
It was therapy. It was therapy, honestly.
I mean,
it was that simple.
Okay. So what was the obsession that you didn't, why were you doing that?
At the core of it, it had a lot to do with the fact that I was lost in terms of what was important to me in my life at that time. I'd become a little bit too ego career driven for my own good. And I'd forgotten that at the core of my entire existence was this great family upbringing. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a family man first. That's what I wanted my identity to be. I wanted to be a husband. I wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a resource for people that I cared about and loved. And I wasn't any of that at that point at 29, 30. I was just waking up at 5 a.m. and working my butt off and going home late and repeat and repeat and repeat. And at a certain point, it's like, there's no version of the person that you grew up wanting to be here anymore. Like, he's just disappeared completely. So for me, I really got to the core of that. And the best part about this story is I met my wife 2 months after I started therapy, which pretty much tells you the impact that therapy can have on you people. So yeah, it's very important.
That is brilliant. That's so brilliant to realize that you were just out of alignment with your own values and what you were going for.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. And Steve, you hit on something that you said earlier, and you and I have had talks prior to this because, I've mentioned on the intro, we're both part of the CG Sports Network and we've been on each other's podcasts. And so when you said that you would go into a room of swim coaches, which, everybody knows that I was a D1 head coach, but you nailed this. Like, I could not put this into words. I've tried to put it into words since I retired from coaching decades ago. You said you would go into a room of swim coaches and people just wanted to talk about X's and O's or physiology or what workouts were you doing to make this person perform at this. And you wanted to get to the meat of, how are your relationships? You wanted to go deeper with these people. And that's just not in the room of swim coaches generally. So that has set, like, since you said that to me, I've been beating myself up about, why did I leave coaching? What was, did I miss out on this big thing? And when you summarized it right there, that was it. And so I'm just in awe of that skill that you have to examine that.
I hope you've not been reliving. I hope you've not been reliving every single conversation you've ever had with a swim coach, because that sounds exhausting. But
no, I haven't. But it really nailed it for me. So
Yeah, well, I want to add to that. One thing the one thing I always noticed over my years of being in those environments was that I always felt like there was this hesitation, there was this lack of trust between a lot of the swim coaching network, in the sense of, is someone trying to gain something from this conversation? Is someone trying to get something out of this that is going to benefit them? Or is someone coming to me to get information that's going to somehow hurt me in some way, shape, or form? And that could be something about a relationship with an athlete. That could be something about specific training methods, whatever it may be. And for me, the one thing I've noticed over the years, I was in the sport for 10 years and I was as a coach, and I left, and probably the 3 closest relationships from an assistant coach standpoint I had were all with women. And the reason was, and the reason I believe that was because they always wanted something more than just to discuss training. They wanted to actually get to know me, and I wanted to get to know them. And from a male dominant, and it's an incredibly male dominant industry is swim coaching. From a male dominant industry that is swim coaching, one thing I think a lot of the men have to start taking a little bit of ownership on is, how receptive am I to simple human connection? How receptive am I to having real conversations with my peers, with my potential competitors? Go one step further, with my actual competitors. Because at the end of the day, if we're just revealing things about who we are as people, we're not giving anybody a competitive edge. We're just getting to know each other on a deeper level, and that should be okay. And like I said, one of Gina Kemp, she's now the assistant coach at South Carolina. She's the godmother for my son. And the reason is because for 5 years, she was this like little big sister relationship where I had I was about a foot taller than her, so I could always keep her at an arm length and, put my hand on her head, like that old sort of brother sisterly rivalry thing. And, one of my best friends, and just recently, Caroline Maxwell, who's now at A&M as an assistant coach, we just had coffee last week when she was in town for Thanksgiving, and little things like that willingness to just talk and just be present with one another. I think as swim coaches, and again, I can't speak for other sports, I've not really been in them, but as swim coaches, this male dominant industry, let's try to let down the competitive guard a little bit. Let's try to embrace the human element of what it is we do, because at the end of the day, every athlete, every coach, at the heart of it, we're all human beings. So why are we not focusing there a little bit more?
And this solves the mystery for me of why it is a male dominated industry, because you have some incredible women that go into coaching, that go into being head coaches. I can think of 2 right off the bat. Kathy Wickstrand, who used to be at Northwestern, amazing, but just probably couldn't deal with the way that the male dominated world. Christine Chef-Chunas, who has been on the show, was at Miami, got out of
She's
coaching.
been on my show too, yeah.
It's like, so, and Kelly Parker Palace, who was at the University of South Carolina. It just was just incongruous with who I was as a person. And I think when women go into that head position and they're met with literally having my ass slapped at an NCAA's by another male coach on deck saying, "Hey, looking good there, Parker." That is not, that's a whole different, that's a part of the Me Too movement, but it's still like a lack of kind of, just a lack of connection there. So that's another commentary for me on just the mystery of why it's such a male dominated industry. So now that we're solving the problems of the world,
I want to just kind of step in here, because I'm so relating to what you're saying. I also grew up in a family that very common sense parents. My dad actually said the exact same thing. Dad, when I do this, my elbow hurts. We'll stop doing that. But the question, I have no tolerance for not talking real. That is who that is who I am. And I have always been I don't even like to really talk about the weather. Like, let's start talking about things that really matter. And Kelly and I do that. And that's why I love Kelly so much. She's always been super real with me. And it does seem to be more of a feminine characteristic in general, but not always. And so I guess my question for you is, how in the cycling world, it's the same. I'm a CEO of a bicycle company, and I also am a competitive cyclist, and I was just getting nervous because I noticed that somebody that is a competitor of mine has been watching my Strava. It's like, ooh, but I guess the question I want to get at is, how do we draw that in reality? How do people, I've struggled. I have a couple of people in my family, and I tend to just come on too real. It puts them, if they're not used to it, they just like back off, Maria. I don't want to tell you my life story. And so, and the same thing with other relationships, like I want to be real, but I've learned that you got to be careful being real, too. And so again, to the question is, how do I help the people that I work with, the people that I live with, how do I go to the place that I want to be, which is,
I feel like we're transitioning into a coaching session here. I love it. It's great. For me, it all comes back to what I'm actually quite passionate about when I was swim coaching, was admitting fault on my own to begin with, and understanding that sometimes from a relationship standpoint, if you want someone to reveal more about themselves, maybe you should initiate that. Maybe you should be the one that reveals something big, something significant about you that's going to prompt them to respect you a little bit more, in the sense of, hey, this is someone they're bringing their truest self to the conversation right now. They're saying, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to bring this to the equation. And now that you know this about me, and I'm revealing this, and I'm comfortable for you to do with that information whatever it is you want to do. I don't know the level of trust that we have just yet, but I'm revealing something about myself right now in this moment that's going to tell you just enough in terms of how serious I am about getting to know you, about you being able to give yourself over to me a little bit more. And I think, again, going back to the analogy with the swim coaching side of things, I was one of these people. There was never anything under my message that I wasn't revealing, And I think sometimes a lot of men, actually, over the years that I encountered, always saw me as a threat because I was so comfortable with myself, so comfortable. And they saw me as a threat because I would just say what was on my mind, and I would tell stories, and there was no reason for telling the story aside from the fact that I felt like it was a great story to tell in that moment. I did not have any other reason to tell the story. And it's a big part of what I think a lot of male coaches struggle with out there, is that, hey, listen, you're not necessarily this perfect final version of yourself. You're this version that is continually being worked upon, and giving a little bit of that over to your athletes, and giving a little bit of that over to the relationships in your life, is actually going to empower you a little bit more. It's actually going to give you a little bit more control over who it is you are deep down, because now you're publicizing it. Now you're getting it out there to the world, like, hey, I'm not perfect. Hey, I'm working on this specific part of myself. So for me personally, Maria, when you that type of a question, for me, it comes back to, hey, I'm going to give something to you a little bit first. I'm going to tell you, listen, I'm not a finished product, and I never will be a finished product. And this is what I'm working on. And I sense usually you can provide something that is somewhere on that radar of what you sense that person needs to reveal about themselves too. So you can really start to bring that out of them and start to create that type of relationship that in time is going to obviously help them, become a better version of themselves.
That's great.
Yeah, I love that. And Steve, there's no doubt you probably recognize that Maria and I are both highly competitive and athletes. And, so Maria, this woman that's been watching your Strava, and I think that's
actually
similar.
a man. It's a man.
Or it's a man. Oh, okay. So you're not going to compete against them, or you are?
Well, I'm competing against everybody that I ride with.
Okay.
This guy owns another company.
Oh,
there's more to it.
Okay.
There's
So it's a business competitor.
It's kind of a business competitor. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're in a competitive environment, so whether you're on the starting line of a bike race, or you're standing behind the blocks, or you are coaching, coaches on deck, and you're competing against each other, or you're an entrepreneur and you're, the way that Maria and I look at it, we are executive leadership coaches. We're all coaches here. Right. So we're promoting your business, and we want people to come to you and use you as a coach. We want them to come to us and use us as a coach. But there's a complete abundance, like there are going to be people that fit like a glove with you and fit like a glove with Maria, and they don't fit with me, but all the vice versa, all the pieces work. So I feel like we'd love to hear your thoughts on when you're in that competitive environment and you are standing next to someone, what do you say to them that might seem vulnerable, but that would open that conversation of, recently we just saw Sarah Sostrom telling Siobhan Haughey that, hey, you can break my world record. I think you can do it. Go for it, girl. You can get this, and that's certainly a nice vulnerability on Sarah's part. And so what do you think about that, Steve?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because it's on some level you obviously need to have and I'm sure in that situation they're familiar with one another enough to be able to open up and say something like that, having competed against one another as often as they have. For me personally, if I sort of relive a lot of those encounters, say at competitions, because that's when coaches are just on top of one another, they're all over the poolside, and you make conversation here, you make conversation there. A lot of the time, I try my hardest not to make it about the competition. I try to have a conversation with someone that has nothing to do with the competition, just to open them up a little bit, just to lighten the mood a little bit. Because for me, I learned that really early on, actually, as a competitor when I was swimming, and I got to the more of the world level, and I was representing Great Britain. I noticed that when you got to these meets, the athletes, they didn't obsess quite as much as I thought they would about the meet. They didn't just live within these bubbles as much as I thought they would. The guys on the British team that were much more established than I was were just laughing and joking and having fun and allowing the conversation to flow a little bit. And then I entered coaching, and I found that coaches, they just took themselves so damn seriously all the time. And there was very little wiggle room for those open and honest conversations. And so for me, I've made it. Don't get me wrong, I almost make myself sound like I'm some sort of black sheep of the coaching world here a little bit, but I'm not at all. Like, I have lots of relationships out there, and a lot of people I'm continuing to remain in touch with, post swim coaching now. For me, a lot of that came down to, hey, when you're in that competitive environment, we all know why we're here. We're here to compete. We're here to try to get our hand on the wall first, and there's very little, if anything, we can do as coaches. And this is a big part of being vulnerable and honest. There's very little thing as coaches we can do in those moments to actually influence the result, because the work has been done. The work's been done. There's going to the Olympic trials and me getting in the face of all the competitors that we're going to be in the final of the 100 freestyle when Brooks is about to swim. That's not going to affect the result of the swim. And, the athletes are responsible for that, and the work's been done for that. The only thing I will say to this though too is, at the end of the day, it's all about, as coaches, when we show up to a competition, what are we there for? If in my case, I was never going to an NCAA championships to win the NCAA championships as a team. I was never privileged to be in that situation as a coach. So I can't speak from that perception. But what I can say is, having watched the coaches that do that and that compete for the top positions at the end of the day from a team side of things, one of the common characteristics I've noticed with them is that they're all really good at allowing the results just to unfold and stepping back a little bit and saying, this is how it's going to be. And I got to know Dave Durden over the course of the summer through the connection with the US team. Awesome guy, amazing job just in terms of helping someone like Brooks along in an environment that was so new to him. But he's a perfect example, a guy that I met the first time with at NCAA championships. And you could tell there's an element of exception, like, hey, we're going to compete the way we're going to compete. There'll be some conversations that we have outside of here, but at the end of the day, we're going to compete the way we're going to compete. And so a lot of the time, I think if we actually look to those at the top, at the surface, they're actually doing a lot of the things that I'm talking about, and they don't get enough recognition for that, in my opinion.
So, as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, I think, a mature coach who's been out there, been around the block, has had some successes, has had some failures, and, understands it, knows what they can control and what they can't. One of the things we've heard from our champions and from coaches time and time again is, what makes a champion? This is Champions Mojo. What makes a champion? And a lot of times I say somebody who's really hungry. And so, wants it really bad. They're a competitor. Is that at odds with what you're talking about?
I don't think it is at all. I don't, because I say it to everyone. I'm the most competitive individual I've ever met. I've met people as equally as competitive, but I've never met anybody more competitive than myself. And I think any athlete that I've ever worked with will tell you that too. But my competitive drive is built into people in the sense of, hey, listen, if we are going to put ourselves in the best position to compete at the highest level, then we have to invest internally. We have to invest in ourselves. And the X's and O's, as you alluded to earlier, Kelly, like I think too many coaches, too many competitors get caught up in the science, in the X's and O's. And there's this whole, we know how many layers there are to our brains, to our emotion, to our subconscious and all this kind of things. There's things in there that, quite frankly, no amount of practices are going to give us an answer to. There's stuff in there that we have to get to the heart of. And that's why, again, going back to the example of walking into a room of swim coaches and not necessarily feeling like I had much in common at times, I think that was the thing. And again, I gave the example with Brooks too. People wanted to reach out. What's the secret? What's the secret sauce? The year that he won the SEC championships as a freshman, everyone within that spring and in that the NCAA championship, was canceled, but we had a lot of Zoom meetings after that with coaches just keeping in touch. What was the secret? What was the secret? I just kept talking about the relationship. I kept talking about the human being behind who Brooks Curry is and was. And for me, I think if we invest in ourselves, the competitor has the best chance of actually realizing their potential. And that, for me, is what I believe makes me the most competitive person I know, is that I feel as though there's this route that we can take to becoming competitive, to becoming our best self, that if we invest properly in that, if we understand that there's all these different things that can influence that, but at the heart of it, it's getting to the core of the person and the relationship, then we're going to be competing at a really high level. And I, in many ways, I think it's kind of a secret that I've been working with for a long time, but I'm putting it out there to the world. And if anybody wants to listen to it, then great.
So is there a difference between being a winner and just knowing yourself and being happy and peaceful about your decisions, your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because I think for me, I've always battled with defining success, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've really wrestled with that a lot over the years, because I did do a lot of things as an athlete that most athletes would kill to be able to do. And I've certainly done a few things recently in the past 12 months as a coach that coaches spend their entire career wanting to achieve. And I walked away from the whole Olympic experience with Brooks and what I got to go through working with USA Swimming a little bit, thinking at the end of the day, the success is there for people to see, but it hasn't changed me in any way, shape, or form because of the work I've done on me. That's why I can make a decision as big for my career and my life as walking away from swim coaching at this time, is because despite all that incredible stuff from a career standpoint happening to me in the last 6 months, I never let it define me. And I think that the winning versus the being comfortable with yourself, I think the greatest champions that we have in life are the ones that can be successful, that can win, that can climb the mountain. But at the same time, they can see that that was just their objective, and that was a mission that they were on, and it was a part of the person they were, and it was an extension of the person they were, but it was never the definition of the person that they were. And I say a guy like Caleb Dressel right now, I mean, he's the epitome of that, right? I mean, yeah. a great guy, a husband, a guy that never seems to put a foot wrong, because deep down, just a good kid, just a really good kid that sees swimming and sees competing as just this awesome extension of his God-given talent that he has within the world of swimming.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, we could talk with you all afternoon, but we're over time. And
oh no.
yes, we are, but we have to ask you the last question, which is, what have we not asked you that you would like our listeners to know?
Well, not to pitch my company too much, but I will now that I'm here.
Yes.
Careercompetitor.com is my website. It's definitely very much still growing and being worked on, and it's not a finished product, but it's where you can find all the information you need about what it is I'm doing now. And I'm just excited to connect with people. So again, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is for me, or I'm ready for something like this, just email me. Just email me and we'll chat and we'll have a call and who knows? Maybe it's just that, and it's nothing more than that, or maybe it's more than that. But I'm always here to talk to people, connect with people, and like I said, all my information's there at careercompetitor.com.
Wonderful. Are you ready to play the fun sprinter round?
Absolutely.
Here we go. This is quick one-word answers. Cat or dog for you?
For me personally, dog. Yeah.
Red or blue?
Red.
Milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Kickboard or no kickboard?
No kickboard.
Mountains or beach?
Beach.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Football or baseball?
Football.
Coffee or
Coffee.
tea? Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Okay. And just so you know, I did find out the stat. Maria and I are both Android phones, that 80% of the world has Android, and only and in the US it's the opposite. So we're global, Maria. We're global. All right. Maria has some for you.
Okay. Favorite color?
Red.
Favorite pizza topping?
Pepperoni.
Favorite vegetable?
Mushroom.
Favorite swim complex in the US?
Seattle Federal Way.
Favorite music genre?
It's become country according to my Spotify, annual summary. Apparently I'm just full blown country now, which is disappointing on
now
some levels.
Now I really trust you. I really trust you now. What's your shoe size?
12.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, older sister.
Okay. What's your favorite Star Wars character or Harry Potter?
Well, I don't. English guy who's never watched Harry Potter, just FYI. Okay. I go against the grain in that regards.
Yeah.
But I have to go with Yoda.
Okay. Can you cook?
Absolutely. My second passion in life.
Okay. After
coaching.
Okay. You're supposed to say your wife, I think, but well.
Oh, yeah. That goes without saying. That's like, yeah.
Okay. What word comes to mind when you dive into the water, when you first dive in the water?
Oh, peace.
Oh, nice. Peace.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is.
I don't think we've ever had the Federal Way swim complex.
No.
I think that you're the first one. We've had a lot of them. Yeah, I love that pool too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Steve, this has been such a pleasure and just fantastic. I just can't wait for everybody to hear it.
Yeah, I love talking with you, Steve. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thank you both. And I'm such a fan of both your work, and I can't appreciate you enough for having me on. So thanks again.
All right, take care.
Our pleasure. Bye.
It's now time for the takeaways. Maria, you and I have heard the takeaways are the best part of the show.
That's right, Kelly, because the takeaways are curated information, which is what we give to our clients when we coach them.
If you would like to take your performance to the next level in health, life, or leadership, go to our website and schedule your free 30-minute consultation.
Yes, just click on our coaching page and book there. We're looking forward to bringing out the champion in you.
And now, the takeaways.
Maria, another amazing interview. And Steve Mellor is we said, what a breath of fresh air, what a unique individual, such different perspectives, and brave and bold to take this new course in his life. So let's go ahead and start with the takeaways. Let's do a couple each. And we just really encourage you that this is definitely an interview. It's a little longer than some of ours, but listening to all of it is so valuable. So Maria, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you got to hear Steve and listen to him and look at his face. He's amazing. He's my first one would be, I can never hear this takeaway enough, that you learn about people, that you help people to grow by listening to them. He said, his secret sauce essentially was that he was in relationship with people, which just means that he listens to them and he tries to hear what it is over the course of conversations, over the course of getting to know somebody, what they really want by listening. So for me, that's a takeaway. It's just a reminder to if I want to love someone and to help someone, that I really have to hear what's beyond, I have to listen to them. I have to listen to what they're saying. I have to continue listening to what they're saying and sort of shut my mouth and shut my thoughts a little bit. So that's my first takeaway. What about you, Kelly?
Gosh. And that is so key. Ties into my first one. My first takeaway is listening to yourself.
Yeah.
So of course you have to listen to others
Right.
to help them and to be able to connect with them and all that, but listening to yourself. So Steve started this process of self-discovery and changing this course in his life 6 years ago when he started to go into counseling. And when we asked him what prompted that, in a nutshell, he was having kind of days that just were not, he was not pleased with those days and he was not happy with those days. And he figured out through listening to himself and going to counseling that he was out of alignment with his own values.
Mm-hmm.
So what he was pursuing, which was this, round the clock swim coach, get up at 5, make recruiting calls till 11. He was not being the father and the husband that were his values. So listening to yourself and being in alignment with your values. So that's my first takeaway. How about your second one?
I love that. I think so much of our unhappiness, we can drill down and say, I'm unhappy because right now I'm doing something that I don't really like, whatever.
Mhm.
So that's, I love that expression when you said it. It's like, oh yeah, oh, that's so good. My second one is another just really practical tip he gave when I asked, how do you create these relationships with maybe competitors or maybe people that you want to sort of soften up with you? He said, you start by just telling stories on yourself, revealing a little bit of your own imperfection, basically being vulnerable. We've said this dozens of ways, but this is a really practical thing. It's like, if I want to break through to someone who's maybe, built a little bit of a wall, I can start by saying, here's my issues. And he said, I am very open. I tell people I'm in therapy, and that does seem to help people be willing to tell them their problems. So I'm going to take that very, very practical bit of advice going forward into relationships where I really I'm so anxious to become intimate with certain people. And I want to figure out the best way to do that. And I think that's a great starting gambit. What about you, Kel?
That is. And it's funny. I wonder if Steve and I had the same communications professor at NC State, because he and I, no, I'm serious, because when he said that in the show, I almost said, this is a phrase that I remember that one of my favorite professors in college, they used to say, the best way to get disclosure from someone is to disclose yourself.
Right.
So that is it. That's really, that's like a rule of communication is disclosure brings disclosure. So that's
very,
just
very
another way of
practical.
saying it.
Yeah.
I love it. So my second one, and to close out the show, is we love to know what makes a champion. So Steve felt, and I totally think it was really wise and bright, is the champions. One of the things that he sees champions do is not attach themselves to the outcome. So this is, there are many parts to this. It could be enjoying the journey, or, that I'm separate. If I go to a race this weekend and I don't perform the certain time I want, I'm still a good person. So I think that was my second takeaway. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I think so too. Very wise man. If
yes. Hope everybody gets to listen. Yep. All right, Maria, another great one in the books. Love you.
Love you too, Kelly. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Champions Mojo podcast with host Kelly Palace and Maria Parker. Champions Mojo is produced by Cabra Media, and a new episode debuts every Tuesday. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Follow Champions Mojo on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @Champions Mojo.